With cybercrime getting more and more complex by the day, corporations are in the need of trained personnel in the field of cybersecurity. Ethical hacking and penetration testing had always been necessary for organizations and the general public to protect the system against malicious attackers. However, with the exponential growth in cyber attacks, the necessity of being trained in ethical hacking is at an all-time high. Many such professionals tend to use Linux distributions for their penetration testing activities. There are specific operating systems which are catered to ethical hackers. These operating systems come pre-installed with the necessary tools and scripts required for ethical hacking. Probably the most famous operating system in this bracket is Kali Linux. For today's video, we will learn about this distribution made by and for hackers. We take you through the intricacies of its hardware and software specifications. Let's take a look at the agenda for today. We start by learning about Kali Linux and a basic explanation of its purpose. We take a look at the history of Kali Linux from the story of its origin to its current day exploits. Next, we learn a few distinct features of Kali Linux that make it an attractive choice for penetration testers worldwide. Moving on, we take a look at the multiple ways we can install Kali Linux to start our journey in the world of penetration testing. In the next few sections, we compare it to an industry rival operating system by the name of Parrot Security Operating System. We take a look at the OS on a grassroots level. Next, we learn about the standout features of Kali Linux and Parrot Security with their unique offerings. We make a direct comparison between Kali and Parrot Security OS as far as their hardware specifications and all-around usability is concerned. We make a conclusion as to which operating system caters to which category of user. In the next topic, we take a detailed look at how we can install Kali Linux on a Windows 10 system using the VMware virtualization software. Moving on, we go through some of the reasons why people should choose Kali Linux as their primary operating system when it comes to ethical hacking and penetration testing. In the next section, we cover the 5 different phases of penetration testing, where each stage is a crucial segment in the entire cycle of our ethical hacking campaign. We also take a look at the most popular tools installed in Kali Linux that are used regularly by ethical hackers as a part of their professional work. Coming to a few live demonstrations, we start by learning some Linux terminal basic commands, set up proxy chains to maintain our privacy on the internet, run a few Nmap scans to find information about our victims, use Wireshark to detect insecure browser traffic traveling through HTTP web pages, learn about Metasploit and its components, and finally use Metasploit to hack into a Windows 10 machine and grant ourselves root access or the admin access, which basically gives us the key to the entire machine. It's no secret that the majority of our internet usage is at the risk of being hacked, be it via unsafe messaging applications or misconfigured operating systems. To counteract this void of digital security, penetration testing has become the norm when it comes to vulnerability assessment. Kali Linux is an operating system that has become a well-known weapon in this fight against hackers. A Linux distribution that is made specifically for penetration testers, Kali Linux has layers of features that we will be covering in today's lesson. Let's take a look at the topics to be covered in this video. We start by learning about Kali Linux and a basic explanation of its purpose. We take a look at the history of Kali Linux from the story of its origin to its current day exploits. Next, we learn a few distinct features of Kali that make it an attractive choice for penetration testers worldwide. Finally, we take a look at the multiple ways we can install Kali Linux to start our journey in the world of penetration testing. Let's start by learning about Kali Linux in general. Kali Linux, which is formerly known as Backtrack Linux, is an open source Linux distribution aimed at advanced penetration testing and security auditing. It contains several hundred tools that are targeted towards various information security tasks such as penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, and reverse engineering. Kali Linux is a multiple platform solution, accessible and freely available to information security professionals and hobbyists. Among all the Linux distributions, Kali Linux takes its roots from the Debian operating system. Debian has been a highly dependable and stable distribution for many years, providing a similarly strong foundation to the Kali desktop. While the operating system is capable of practically modifying every single part of our installation, the networking components of Kali become disabled by default. This is done to prevent any external factors from affecting the installation procedure, which may pose a risk in critical environments. Apart from boosting security, it allows a deeper element of control to the most enthusiastic of users. We did not get Kali Linux since the first day. How did it come into existence? Let's take a look at some of its history. Kali Linux is based on years of knowledge and experience in building penetration testing and operating systems. During all these project lifelines, there have been only a few different developers, as the team has always been small. The first project was called WOPEX, which stands for White Hat Knopex. As can be inferred from the name, it was based on the Knopex operating system as its underlying OS. WOPEX had releases ranging from version 2.0 to 2.7. This made way for the next project, which was known as WAX, or the longhand being White Hat Slacks. The name change was because the base OS was changed from Knopex to Slacks. WAX started at version 3 as a nod, it carrying on from WOPEX. There was a similar OS being produced at the same time, Auditor Security Collection, often being shortened to just Auditor, which was once again using Knopex. Its efforts were combined with WAX to produce Backtrack. Backtrack was based on Slackware from version 1 to version 3, but switched to Ubuntu later on with version 4 to version 5. Using the experience gained from all of this, Kali Linux came after Backtrack in 2013. Kali started off using Debian stable as the engine under the hood before moving to Debian testing when Kali Linux became a rolling operating system. Now that we understand the history and the purpose of Kali Linux, let us learn a little more about its distinct features. The latest version of Kali comes with more than 600 penetration tools pre-installed. After reviewing every tool that was included in Backtrack, developers have eliminated a great number of tools that either simply did not work or which duplicated other tools that provided the same or similar functionality. The Kali Linux team is made up of a small group of individuals who are the only ones trusted to commit packages and interact with the repositories, all of which is done using multiple secure protocols. Restricting access of critical code bases to external assets greatly reduces the risk of source contamination, which can cause Kali Linux users worldwide a great deal of damage as a direct victim of cybercrime. Although penetration tools tend to be written in English, the developers have ensured that Kali includes true multilingual support, allowing more users to operate in their native language and locate the tools they need for the job. The more comfortable a user feels with the intricacies of the operating system, the easier it is to maintain a stronghold over the configuration and the device in general. Since ARM-based single-board systems like the Raspberry Pi are becoming more and more prevalent and inexpensive, the development team knew that Kali's ARM support would need to be as robust as they could manage with fully working installations. Kali Linux is available on a wide range of ARM devices and has ARM repositories integrated with the mainline distributions, so the tools for ARM are updated in conjunction with the rest of the distribution. All this information is necessary for users to determine if Kali Linux is the correct choice for them. If it is, what are the ways that they can go forward with this installation and start their penetration testing journey? The first way to use Kali Linux is by launching the distribution in the live USB mode. This can be achieved by downloading the installer image file or the ISO file from the Kali Linux website and flashing it to a USB drive with a capacity of at least 8 GB. Some people don't need to save their data permanently, and a live USB is the perfect solution for such cases. After the ISO image is flashed, the thumb drive can be used to boot a fully working installation of the operating system, with the caveat that any changes made to the OS in this mode are not written permanently. Some cases allow persistent usage in live USBs, but those require further configuration than normal situations. But what if the user wants to store data permanently in the installed OS? The best and the most reliable way to ensure this is the full-fledged hard disk installation. This will ensure the complete usage of the system's hardware capabilities and will take into account the updates and the configurations being made to the OS. This method is supposed to override any pre-existing operating system installed on the computer, be it Windows or any other variant of Linux. The next alternative route for installing Kali Linux would be to use virtualization software such as VMware or VirtualBox. The software will be installed as a separate application on an already existing OS, and Kali Linux can be run as an operating system in the same computer as a window. The hardware requirements will be completely customizable, starting with the allotted RAM to the virtual hard disk capacity. The usage of both a host and guest operating system like Kali Linux allows users a safe environment to learn while not putting their systems at risk. If you want to learn more about how one can go forward with this method, we have a dedicated video where Kali Linux is being installed on VMware while running on a Windows 10 operating system. You can find the link in the description box to get started with your very own virtual machine. The final way to install Kali Linux is by using a dual boot system. To put it in simple words, the Kali Linux OS will not be overwriting any pre-installed operating system on a machine, but will be installed alongside it. When a computer boots up, the user will get a choice to boot into either of these operating systems. Many people prefer to keep both the Windows and Kali Linux installed, so the distribution of work and recreational activities is also allotted effectively. It gives users a safety valve should their custom Linux installation run into any bugs that cannot be fixed from within the operating system. Professionals in security testing, penetration testing, and ethical hacking utilize Linux as their preferred operating system. It provides several configurable distributions that you may configure based on your end use. Kali Linux and Parrot OS are two popular penetration testing distributions. While these operating systems each have unique offerings, the overall choice can differ between personnel thanks to their various tools and hardware specifications. Today we will look at both these distributions and settle on the perfect choice for each type of user. Let's go through the agenda for this video. We will learn about Kali Linux and Parrot Security OS from scratch, while understanding their primary selling points as a Linux distribution catered towards penetration testers. Next, we know about some features of these operating systems that stand out of their package. Finally, we directly compare Kali Linux and Parrot Security OS, thereby making a clear-cut conclusion on which OS is perfect on a per-requirement basis. So let's start by learning about Kali Linux from a ground level. Kali Linux, which is formerly known as Backtrack Linux, is an open source Linux distribution aimed at advanced penetration testing and security auditing. It contains several hundred tools targeted towards various information security tasks such as penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, and reverse engineering. Kali Linux is a multi-platform solution, accessible and freely available to information security professionals and hobbyists. Among all the Linux distributions, Kali Linux takes its roots from the Debian operating system. Debian has been a highly dependable and a stable distribution for many years, providing a similarly strong foundation to the Kali Linux desktop. While the operating system can practically modify every single part of our installation, the networking components of Kali Linux come disabled by default. This is done to prevent any external factors from affecting the installation procedure, which may pose a risk in critical environments. Apart from boosting security, it allows a more profound element of security control to the most enthusiastic of users. Now, let's take a look at Parrot Security operating system. Parrot Security OS is a Debian-based Linux distribution with an emphasis on security, privacy, and development. It is built on the Debian's testing branch and uses a custom hardened Linux kernel. Parrot Security contains several hundred tools targeted towards tasks such as penetration testing, computer forensics, reverse engineering, and security research. It is seen as a generally lightweight distribution that can work under rigorous hardware and software specifications. It features a distinct forensics mode that does not mount any of the system's hard disks or partitions and has no influence on the host system, making it much more stealthy than its regular occurrence. This mode is used on the host system to execute forensic procedures. A rolling release is a paradigm in which software upgrades are rolled out constantly rather than in batches of versions in software development. This ensures that the software is constantly up to date. A rolling release distribution such as Parrot Security OS follows the same concept. It provides the most recent Linux kernel and software versions as soon as they become available. With the basic introduction to the operating systems out of the way, let us take a look at the unique features of both Kali Linux and Parrot Security OS. The latest version of Kali Linux comes with more than 600 penetration tools pre-installed. After reviewing every tool included in Backtrack, developers have eliminated a significant number of tools that either simply did not work or duplicated other tools that provided the same and similar functionality. The Kali Linux team comprises a small group of individuals who are the only ones trusted to commit packages and interact with the repositories, all of which is done using multiple secure protocols. Restricting access of critical code bases to external assets dramatically reduces the risk of source contamination, which can cause Kali Linux users worldwide a great deal of damage as a direct victim of cybercrime. Although penetration tools tend to be written in English, the developers have ensured that Kali includes proper multilingual support, allowing more users to operate in the native language and locate the tools they need for their job. The more comfortable a user feels with the intricacies of the operating system, the easier it is to maintain a strong hold over the configuration and the device in general. Since ARM-based single-board systems like the Raspberry Pi are becoming more prevalent and inexpensive, the development team knew that Kali's ARM support would need to be as robust as they could manage with fully working installations. Kali Linux is available on a wide range of ARM devices and has ARM repositories integrated with the mainline distribution, so the tools for ARM are updated in conjunction with the rest of the distribution. Let's take a look at some of the features of Parrot Security operating system now. Along with a giant catalog of scripts, Parrot Security OS has its own hardened Linux kernel modified explicitly to provide as much security and resistance to hackers as possible in the first line of defense. The configurations in the operating system act as the second gateway, taking care of malicious requests and dropping them off. This is particularly beneficial since should there be a scenario where the latest Linux kernel is causing some particular issue, the Parrot OS development team will most likely iron it out first before passing it on as an update. If the custom hardened kernel wasn't reason enough, Parrot Security developers managed to install more hacking tools and scripts to ensure a smooth transition for the Kali Linux users. All the tools you find in Kali are present in Parrot OS and a few extra ones for good measure. And this has been achieved while keeping roughly the same operating system size between both of them. However, it's not all productivity points for Parrot OS. They provide a choice between two different desktop environments, Mate, which comes pre-installed by default, and KDE. For those unfamiliar with Linux terminology, you can think of desktop environments as the main UI for a distribution. Being highly modular in nature, one can use Parrot Security OS while adding another desktop environment that they find appealing. While Kali Linux has only a single option, Parrot Security has provided two optimized builds with Mate Desktop and KDE Desktop. One of the primary advantages of Parrot OS over Kali Linux is that it's relatively lightweight. This implies that it takes significantly less disk space and computing power to function correctly, with as little as 320 MB of RAM required. In reality, Parrot OS is designed to operate successfully off a USB stick, but Kali Linux does not work well from a USB drive and is generally installed in a virtual machine. Parrot OS is more of a niche distribution if you're searching for something lighter than Kali Linux. Features are great, but what about performance? Real-world metrics. Let us compare both these operating systems directly with respect to their hardware specifications and usability. In the end, we can decide on what distribution is fit for each type of user. For our first point of comparison, let's take a look at the RAM required. For optimum performance of the operating system, which is highly essential when trying to crack hashes or something of similar nature, RAM usage is a very important facet. While Kali Linux demands at least 1 GB of RAM, Parrot Security can operate optimally with a minimum of 320 MB of RAM. For correctly displaying graphical elements, Kali Linux requires GPU-based acceleration, while this is not the case with Parrot Security OS, which doesn't require any graphical acceleration needed from the user side. Once these operating systems are installed on VMware using their live boot ISOs, they take up a minimum amount of hard disk storage. Both of these operating systems have a recommended disk storage of minimum of 20 GB in Kali Linux and a minimum of 15 GB in Parrot Security, so they can install all the tools necessary in the ISO file. When it comes to the category and the selection of tools, Kali Linux has always been the first in securing every single tool available for hackers in the penetration testing industry. Parrot Security, on the other hand, has managed to take it up a notch. While specializing in wireless pen testing, Parrot Security makes it a point that all the tools that Kali Linux provides has been included in the ISO, while simultaneously adding some extra tools that many users will have to install from third-party sources in Kali Linux. Being a decade-old penetration testing distribution, Kali Linux has formed up a very big community with strong support signature. Parrot Security, on the other hand, is still growing, and it is garnering much more interest among veteran penetration testers and ethical hackers. A primary drawback of Kali Linux is the extensive hardware requirement. To perform optimally, it requires higher memory than Parrot Security. It also needs graphical acceleration while demanding more virtual hard disk storage. Parrot Security, on the other hand, was initially designed to run off a USB drive directly, thereby requiring very minimal requirements from a hardware perspective, like just 320 MB of RAM and no graphical acceleration needed. This means Parrot Security is much more feasible for people who are not able to devote massive resources to either their virtual machine or on their laptop hard disk directly. With the comparison done between both of these operating systems, let's take a look at the type of users both of these are catered to. One can go with Kali Linux if they want the extensive community support offered by its users, if they want to go with a trusted development team that have been working on this distribution since many years, if they have a powerful system which can run Kali Linux optimally without having to bottleneck performance, and if they are comfortable with a semi-professional environment which may or may not be very useful for new beginners. One can decide to go with Parrot Security if they want to go with a very lightweight and lean distribution that can run pretty much on all systems. It also has a lot of tools pre-installed, and some of them are not even present on Kali Linux. It is much more suitable for underpowered rigs where users do not have a lot of hardware resources to provide to the operating system, and thereby it is much more feasible for people with underpowered laptops or no graphical acceleration. Compared to Kali Linux, Parrot Security's desktop environment is also relatively easier to use for new beginners. For people who are just getting into ethical hacking, Parrot Security does a relatively better job of introducing them to the operating system and to the various tools without having to dump them into the entire intricacies. The installation of Kali Linux. There are multiple ways to install Kali Linux. We can either install it on a normal hard drive, in a virtual machine software such as VMware or VirtualBox, or we can do that in hard bare metal machines. Now, for the convenience of explanation, we're going to install Kali Linux today on a virtual machine software known as VMware. VMware is able to run multiple operating systems on a single host machine, which in our case is a Windows 10 system. To get started with Kali Linux installation, we have to go to the website to download an image file. We go to Get Kali, and as you can see, there are multiple platforms on which this operating system can be inverted. As per our requirement, we're going to go with the virtual machine section. As you can see, it is already recommended by the developers. This is the download button, which will download a 64-bit ISO file. We can download 32-bit, but that is more necessary for hard metal machines, or if you're going to use it for older devices which do not support 64-bit operating systems yet. After clicking on the download button, we can see we have a WinRAR archive which will have the ISO files. For now, we have downloaded the ISO file and it is already present with me. So we can start working on the VMware side of things. Once the ISO file is downloaded, we open up VMware Workstation. We go to File and we create a new virtual machine. In these two options, it is highly recommended to go with the typical setup rather than the custom one. The custom is much more advanced and requires much more information from the user, which is beneficial for developers and people who are well versed with virtualization software, but for 90% of the cases, typical setup will be enough. Here, we can select the third option, which will be I will install the operating system later. In some operating systems, we can use the ISO file here directly and VMware will install it for us. But for right now, in the case of Kali Linux, the third option is always the safest. Kali Linux is a Linux distribution, so we can select Linux over here, and the version, as you can see here, have multiple versions such as the multiple kernels. Every distribution has a parent distribution. For example, Kali Linux has Debian, and there are other distributions which are based or forked from some parent distribution. Kali Linux is based off Debian, so we can go with the highest version of Debian, which is the Debian 10.x 64-bit. Go on next. We can write any such name. We can write Kali Linux so that it will be easier to recognize the virtual machine among this list of virtual machine instances. The location can be any location you decide to put. By default, it should be the documents folder, but anywhere you put, it will hold up all the information of the operating system. All the files you download, all the configurations you store, everything will be stored in this particular location that you provide. When we go next, we are asked about the disk capacity. This disk capacity will be all the storage that will be provided to your virtual machine of Kali Linux. Think of your Windows device. If you have a 1 terabyte of hard drive, you have the entirety of the hard disk to store data on. How much data you give here, you can only store up to that amount of data. Not to mention, some amount of capacity will be taken up by the operating system itself to store its programs and applications. For now, we can give around, let's say, 15 GB of information. Or if the recommended size for Debian is 20, you can just go ahead at 20. It depends all on the user case. If you are going to use it extensively, you can even go as high as 50 or 60 GB if you have plans to download many more applications and perform multiple different tests. Another option we get over here is storing virtual disks as a single file or storing them into multiple files. As we already know, this virtual machine runs entirely on VMware. Sometimes when transferring these virtual machine instances, let's say from a personal computer to a work computer, we're going to need to copy up the entire folder that we had mentioned before over here. Instead, all virtual machines have a portability feature. Now this portability feature is possible for all scenarios, except it is much easier if they split the virtual disk into multiple files. Now even if this makes porting virtual machines easier from either system to system or software to software, let's say if you want to switch from VMware to VirtualBox or vice versa, the performance takes a small hit. It's not huge, but it's recommended to go with storing the virtual disk as a single file if you have no purposes of ever moving the virtual machine. Even if you do, it's not a complete stop that it cannot be ported. It's just easier when using multiple files. But in order to get the best performance out of the virtual machine, we can store it as a single file over here. This is a summary of all the changes that we made and all the configurations that have been settled until now. Now at this point of time, we have not provided the .iso file yet, which is the installation file for the Kali Linux that we downloaded from this website. As of right now, we have only configured the settings of the virtual machine. So we can press on Finish. And we have Kali Linux in the list. Now, To make the changes further, we press on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. The memory is supposed to give the RAM of the virtual machine. So devices with RAM of 8 GB or below that, giving high amount of RAM will cause performance issues and the host system. If the memory has some amount of free storage left, let's say on idle storage, my Windows machine takes about 2 GB. So I have 6 GB of memory to provide. Although if you provide all of the 6 GB, it will be much more difficult for the host system to run everything properly. So for this instance, we can keep it as 2 GB of memory for the virtual machine instance. Similarly, we can use the number of processors and we can customize it according to our liking. Let's say if we want to use one processor, but we want to use 2 different cores, we can select them as well. Hard disk is pre-set up as the SCSI hard disk and it does not need to be changed for the installation of this operating system at all. CD/ID DVD. This is where the installation file comes. You can think of the ISO file that we downloaded as a pen drive or a USB thumb drive which is necessary to install an operating system. To provide this, we're going to select Use ISO image file. We're going to click on Browse. Go to Downloads and select the ISO file over here. Select Open. And we can see it is already loaded up. Next, in the network adapter, it is recommended to use NAT. This helps the virtual machine to draw the internet from the host machine settings. If your host machine is connected to the internet, then the virtual machine is connected as well. There are some other options such as host only or custom segments or LAN segments, but those are not necessary for installation. Rest of them are pretty standard, which do not need any extra configuration and can be left as it is. Press OK. And now we can power on this virtual machine. In this screen, we can choose how we want to proceed with the installation. We have a Start Installer option over here. So we're going to press Enter on that. We're going to wait for the things to load from the ISO file. The first step in the installation is choosing the language of the operating system. For this, we can go with English as standard. This is a location. This will be used for setting up the time and some of the internal settings which depend entirely on the location of the user. So for this, we're going to go with India. Configuring the keyboard, it's always recommended to go with the American English first. Many people make a mistake of going with the Indian keyboard if it is possible, and it provides a lot of issues later on. So it's always preferred to go with the American English, and if later we see some necessity of another keyboard dialect that is required, we can install it later. But for now, we should always stick with American English as a basic. At this point, it's going to load the installation components from the .iso file. It is a big file of 3.6 GB, so it has a lot of components that need to be put into the virtual machine, which can also be used to detect hardware. Once the hardware and the network configuration is done by the ISO file, we want to write a host name for the system. This host name can be anything which is used to recognize this device on a local network or a LAN cable. Let's say if we use the name Kali. Domain name, we can skip it for now. It's not necessary as such for the installation. This is the full name for the user. Let's say we can provide the name as Simplilearn as a full name. Next, we're going to set up a username. This username is going to be necessary to identify the user from its root accounts and the subsequent below accounts. For now, we can give it as something as simply123. Now we have to choose a password for the user. Now remember, since this is the first user that is being added onto this newly installed operating system, it needs to be a password for the administrator. We can use whichever password we like over here and use the same password below. and press on continue. At this point, it's going to detect on the components on which the operating system can be installed. Like here, there are multiple options like the use entire disk and set up LVM, use entire disk and set up encrypted LVM. For newcomers, it is recommended to just use the first one, since LVM encryption is something that you can learn afterwards when you're much more hands-on with the Linux operating system. For now, we're going to use the use entire disk guided installation and press on continue. When we set up the virtual machine on VMware, we had set up a disk capacity. There we gave a purpose 20 GB. That is the hard disk which is being discovered here. Even though it is a virtual disk, on VMware it acts as a normal hard disk on which an operating system can be installed. So we select this one and press on continue. Here there is a multiple partition system. All the operating systems that are installed have different components. One is used for the keeping of the applications, one for the files, other for the RAM management and other things. For newcomers, it is always recommended to keep it in one partition. And we're going to select that and press on continue. This is just an overview of the partition it's going to make. As you can see, it has a primary partition of 20.4 GB and a logical partition of 1 GB used for swap memory. Now these kind of naming can be confusing for people who are not well versed with Linux operating systems or in general virtualization. But for now, you can go ahead and press on continue, as this will be fine. We can press on finish partitioning and write changes to disk and continue. It's just a confirmation page. As you can see, it's wrote that SCSI3 is our virtual hard disk of 20 GB disk capacity. We write the changes to the disk. We press yes and click on continue. At this point, the installation has started. Now this installation will take a while depending on the amount of RAM provided, the processors provided, and how quickly the performance of the system is being hampered by the host machine. On quicker systems, this will be rather quick, while on the smaller ones, this will take a while. Since this is going to take some time to install, as it is being run on a virtual machine with only 2 GB of RAM, we're going to speed up this part of the video so we don't have to waste any more time just watching the progress bar. Now that our core installation is completed, it's asking us to configure a package manager. The work of a package manager on Linux operating systems is similar to the Google Play Store on Android mobile devices and on the App Store for the Apple devices. It's an interface to install external applications which are not installed by default. Let's say for Google Chrome or any other browser which can be used to browse the internet. At this point of time, it's asked us to select a network mirror. We're going to select as yes and move forward with this. Next, it's going to ask us for an HTTP proxy, which we can leave it as blank and press it as continue forward. At this point of time, it's looking for updates to the Kali Linux installation. This will fetch the new builds from the Kali server, so the installation is always updated to the latest version. Now that the package manager is configured, we have the grub bootloader. The grub is used for selecting the operating system while booting up. Its core functionality is to allow the operating system to be loaded correctly without any faults. So at this point of time, if it asks install the grub bootloader to your primary drive, we can select this as yes and press continue. Remember, the installation was conducted on dev SDA. So we're going to select installation of the grub loader on the same hard disk that we have configured. We press this one and press continue. So now the grub bootloader is being installed. The grub is highly essential because it shows the motherboard where to start the operating system from. Even if the operating system is installed correctly and all the files are in correct order, the absence of a bootloader will not be able to launch the OS properly. As you can see, the installation is finally complete. So now we can press on continue and it's going to finalize the changes. Now you can see Kali Linux being booted up straight away. It doesn't check for the ISO file anymore since the operating system is now installed onto the virtual hard disk storage that we had configured before. Here we're going to enter our username and password that we had set up before. And we have the Kali Linux system booted up. And this is your homepage. We can see the installed applications over here, which are being used for penetration testing by multiple security analysts worldwide. All of these come pre-installed with Kali Linux, and others can be installed using the apt package manager that we had configured. We can see our full name over here. And with this, our installation of the Kali Linux is complete. It's no secret that the vast bulk of our internet usage is vulnerable to hacking, whether it's through hazardous messaging apps or faulty operating systems. Penetration testing has become the norm for vulnerability assessment in order to fill this vacuum in digital security. Kali Linux is a well-known operating system in this fight against hackers. Kali Linux, a distribution designed specifically for penetration testers, has layers of features that we will go over in today's lesson and take a look at some of the tools and features that the operating system has to offer. Let's take a look at the video's topics and features that the operating system has to offer. Let's take a look at the video's topics. We start by learning the requirements of an operating system like Kali Linux. We learn more about the core features of the OS and its intricacies. Moving on, we take a look at the 5 distinct stages of penetration testing that dictate the flow of vulnerability assessment in general. Next, we learn about some important tools that can be found on Kali Linux, which are geared specifically for ethical hacking purposes. And finally, we have an extensive demonstration where we work on some basic terminal commands, proxy tools, and a couple of highly regarded software from the crux of the operating system.
Choose from over 300 in-demand skills and get access to 1,000 plus hours of video content for free. Visit SkillUp by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
Let's start by learning why one should learn Kali Linux in the first place. In today's world, an organization's most valuable asset is its information or data. This is true for all kinds of businesses, be it public or private. On a daily basis, they all deal with enormous amounts of sensitive information. As a consequence, terrorist groups, hacking teams, and cyber thieves often attack them. To ensure this safety and protection, businesses use a variety of security measures and regularly update their index. Organizations must be proactive in this age of digitalization by regularly assessing and updating their security. Every day, hackers discover new methods to breach firewalls. Ethical hackers or white hat hackers provide a fresh perspective on security. They conduct penetration tests to validate security measures. Generally, they will penetrate your networks and give you relevant information about your security posture. Once an organization has this knowledge, it may upgrade its security procedures accordingly. The latest version of Kali Linux comes with more than 600 penetration tools pre-installed. After reviewing every tool that was included in Backtrack, developers have eliminated a great number of tools that either simply did not work or which duplicated other tools that provided the same or similar functionality. Occasionally, when conducting penetration testing or hacking, we must automate our activities since there may be hundreds of conditions and payloads to test, and manually examining everything is time-consuming. To improve our productivity, we utilize tools that come pre-packaged with Kali Linux. These tools not only save us time, but also accurately capture and process the data. The Kali Linux team is made up of a small group of individuals who are the only ones trusted to commit packages and interact with the repositories, all of which is done using multiple secure protocols. Restricting access of critical code bases to external assets greatly reduces the risk of source contamination. Although penetration tools tend to be written in English, the developers have ensured that Kali includes true multilingual support, allowing more users to operate in their native language and locate the tools they need to do for the job. Since ARM-based single board systems like the Raspberry Pi are becoming more and more prevalent and inexpensive, the development team knew that Kali's ARM support would need to be as robust as they could manage with fully working installations. Kali Linux is available on a wide range of ARM devices and has ARM repositories integrated with the mainline distribution, so tools for ARM are updated in conjunction with the rest of the distribution tools. Now that we understand the necessity for an operating system like Kali Linux, let us take a look at some of its core features and offerings to the ethical hacking world. Kali Linux, formerly known as Backtrack Linux, is an open source Linux distribution which is aimed at advanced penetration testing and security auditing. It contains several hundred tools targeted towards various information security tasks such as penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, and reverse engineering. Kali Linux is a multi-platform solution accessible and freely available to information security professionals and hobbyists. Among all the Linux distributions, Kali Linux takes its roots from the Debian operating system. Debian has been a highly dependable and stable distribution for many years, providing a similarly strong foundation to the Kali Linux desktop. While the operating system is capable of practically modifying every single part of our installation, the networking components of Kali Linux come disabled by default. This is done to prevent any external factors from affecting the installation procedure, which may pose a risk in critical environments. Apart from boosting security, it allows a deeper element of security and control to the most enthusiastic of users. Let us now take a look at the 5 stages or phases of penetration testing. This is the first stage of the penetration test, which is known as the reconnaissance phase. In this stage, the security researcher collects information about the target. It can be done actively, which means you are collecting information without contacting the target, or even both. It helps security firms gather information about the target system, network components, active machines, open ports and access points, operating system details, etc. This activity can be performed by using information available in the public domain and using different tools. The next phase is more tool-oriented rather than performed manually, and it is the scanning phase. The penetration tester runs one or more scanner tools to gather more information about the target. The penetration tester runs one or more scanner tools to gather information about the target. By using various scanners such as war dialers, port scanners, network mappers, and vulnerability scanners, the tester collects as many vulnerabilities which help to turn an attack in a more sophisticated way. The next stage is known as the gaining access phase. In this phase, the penetration tester tries to establish a connection with the target and exploit the vulnerabilities found in the previous stage. Exploitation may be buffer overflow attacks, denial of service or DOS attacks, session hijacking, and many more. Basically, penetration tester extracts information and sensitive data from servers by gaining access using different tools. In the maintaining access phase, the penetration tester tries to create a backdoor for himself. It helps him to identify hidden vulnerabilities in the system and can later act as a gateway to retrieve control of the system. In the final phase of covering tracks, the penetration tester tries to remove all logs and footprints which help the administrator identify his presence. This helps the tester to think like a hacker and perform corrective actions to mitigate those activities. Now that we understand the basics of penetration testing and how ethical hackers go about their way, let us take a look at some notable tools which can be used on Kali Linux. At the top of the chain lies Nmap. Nmap is a free and open source utility port scanner which can be used for network discovery and security auditing. Many systems and network administrators also find it useful for tasks such as network inventory, managing service upgrade schedules, and monitoring host or service uptime. It is most beneficial in the early stages of ethical hacking, where a hacker must figure the possible entry point to a system before running the necessary exploits, thus allowing the hacker to leverage any insecure openings and breach the device. It's a part of the scanning phase of the penetration testing. Nmap uses raw IP packets in novel ways to determine what hosts are available on the network, what services these hosts are offering, what operating systems they are running and their versions, what type of packet filters and firewalls are in use, and dozens of other characteristics. It was designed to rapidly scan large networks but works fine against single hosts as well. Since every application that connects to a network needs to do so via a port, the wrong port or server configuration can open a can of worms which lead to a thorough breach of the system and ultimately a fully hacked device. Next on the list we have Metasploit. The Metasploit framework is a very powerful tool that can be used by cybercriminals as well as ethical hackers to probe systemic vulnerabilities on networks and servers. As a part of the third stage of penetration testing, it's an open source framework which can be easily customized and used with most operating systems. With Metasploit, the ethical hacking team can use a ready-made or custom code and introduce it into a network to probe for weak spots. As another flavor of threat hunting, once these flaws are identified and documented, the information can be used to address systemic weaknesses and prioritize solutions. Once a particular vulnerability is identified and the exploit is fed into the system, there are a host of options for the hacker. Depending on the vulnerability, hackers can even run root commands from the terminal, allowing complete control over the activities of the compromised system as well as all personal data stored on the device. A big advantage of Metasploit is the ability to run full-fledged scans on a target system, thereby giving a detailed picture of the security index of said system. This also provides the necessary exploits that can be used to bypass the firewalls and the antivirus software. Having a single solution to gather almost all the necessary points of attack is very useful for ethical hackers and penetration testers, as denoted by the high rank in this list. At number 3, we have Wireshark. Wireshark is the world's foremost and widely used networking protocol analyzer. It lets you see what's happening on your network at a microscopic level and is the de facto standard across many commercial and non-profit enterprises, government agencies, and educational institutions. Wireshark is a popular open source tool to capture network packets and converts them to human-readable binary format. It provides every single detail of the organization's network infrastructure. It consists of devices designed to help measure the ins and outs of the network. The information collected through Wireshark can be used for various purposes, such as real-time or offline network analysis, identification of the traffic coming onto your network, its frequency, and its latency between specific hops. This helps network administrators generate statistics based on real-time data. Wireshark is also a cross-platform tool that can be installed on Windows, Linux, and Mac systems to enable hackers in all ecosystems to monitor network traffic irrespective of the operating system. The development team is determined to maintain this level of freedom for their users in the foreseeable future. The next tool on our list is AirGarden, which is a part of the third phase of penetration testing. This is a multi-use bash script for Linux systems to hack and audit wireless networks like our everyday Wi-Fi router and its counterparts. Along with being able to launch denial of service attacks on compromised networks, this multi-purpose Wi-Fi hacking tool has very rich features which support multiple methods for Wi-Fi hacking, including multi-fi WPS hacking modes, all-in-one WEP attack, handshake file capturing, evil twin attacks, pixie dust, and so much more. It usually needs an external network adapter that supports monitor mode, which is necessary to be able to capture wireless traffic traversing the air channels. Thanks to its open source nature, AirGarden can be used with multiple community plugins and add-ons, thereby increasing its effectiveness against a wide variety of routers, both in the 2.4 GHz band and 5 GHz band. The next tool is John the Ripper. John the Ripper is an open source password security auditing and password recovery tool available for many operating systems. John the Ripper Jumbo supports hundreds of hash and cipher types, including for user passwords of operating systems, web apps, groupware, database servers, network traffic captures, encrypted private keys, file systems, and document files. Some of the key features of the tool include offering multiple modes to speed up password cracking, automatically detecting the hashing algorithm used by the passwords, and the ease of running and configuring the tool, making it a password cracking script of choice for novices and professionals alike. It can use dictionary attacks along with regular brute forcing to speed up the process of cracking the correct password without wasting additional resources. The word list being used in this dictionary attacks can be used from the user's end, allowing for a completely customizable process. Now that we have covered the basics of Kali Linux, let us take a look at the agenda for our demo today. We start out with a few terminal commands that are a basic part of a Linux operating system. We configure our own proxy chains to maintain anonymity while running penetration testing attacks on our victims. Next, we run a few nmap scans on a local Windows 10 machine to find out the type of information that can be gathered in such a scenario. Moving on, we use Wireshark to monitor internet traffic and understand the importance of encryption and security when browsing the World Wide Web. Next, we learn about Metasploit and its various applications in the line of vulnerability assessment of a device. And finally, we use Metasploit to take root access of a fully updated Windows 10 computer system. Let's begin with some terminal basics on Kali Linux. When most people hear the term Linux, they envision a complex operating system used only by programmers. However, the experience is not as frightening as it appears. Linux is an umbrella term for a collection of free and open source Unix operating systems. There are many variants like Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian. These are distributions, will be a more precise term. When using a Linux operating system, you will most likely utilize a shell, which is a command line interface that provides access to the operating system services. The majority of Linux distributions ship with a graphical user interface, also known as GUI, as their primary shell. This is done to facilitate user interaction in the first place. Having said that, a command line interface is suggested due to its increased power and effectiveness. By entering the commands into the CLI, tasks that require a multi-step GUI procedure may be completed in a matter of seconds. We can start the terminal by clicking on the prompt icon here on top. Once the terminal is opened, we can put up our commands. The first command that we are going to look into is pwd. pwd stands for present working directory. As of right now, what you are seeing is the terminal window by default. If I write pwd and press enter, this shows the directory in which the terminal is being run on. As of right now, it's in the nf folder of my desktop, which is specifically this folder. If I open up this folder, you can see it is currently empty, as in it has no contents. If I use another command known as mkdir, which is supposed to stand for make directory, and I write nf2, shortage for new folder 2. If I open up the nf, you can see the new folder is created. This is how the pwd command works. Another important command to change directories, it's called the cd command. Let's say right now if I am in nf, I want to create a new file in nf2 folder or something else in the nf2 folder. I have to shift to cd nf2. Now if I write pwd, it will show the present working directory of home, Simplilearn, desktop, nf, and inside that I am in nf2 right now. It is done to navigate through the Linux files and directories. It requires either the full path or just the name of the directory. If we have to move a completely different folder on a completely different file, then we can use the entire path like this. For now, cd works. Another few commands is we can write cd ... and it will come back one folder Now the PWD will be just NF and not NF2. Let's say we are in this folder and we want to go a different file. Let's say if we just go for cd home, Simplilearn. That's it. Right now, these are the folders in our current present working directory. We have the desktop, the documents, downloads, etc. From here, we can again go to the desktop using the same cd command, cross-check the changing of directories, and check the files again. And yes, there we go, NF. How do we know this? What are the commands that are used to show the files and folders? That folder is known as the ls command. ls can be used to view the contents of a directory. By default, this command will display the contents of your current working directory. If we add some other parameters, we can find the contents of other directories as well. There are some hidden files as well in Linux which cannot be showed just with ls. For example, if we just go to cd etc, which is a configuration folder for Linux, if we write ls now, these are the files that can be seen. If we want to see the hidden files, we'll have to add one more parameter here like ls-a, and as you can see, the number of files have increased this time around. There are other things as well that we can see with Linux. ls-al will show the hidden files along with some of the parameters and some of the permissions that has been provided for each file. As you can see, many of these files have root access. Some of them can write, some of them can read. It differs file to file, and the ls-al command is used to check each of these files' permission and change them accordingly if needed. The next command that we can look for is the cat command or concatenate. It is one of the most frequently used commands, and it is used to list the contents of a file on the output. For example, let's say if I have a file at the desktop. In this NF2 folder, I will create a document, create an empty file, e-file. I'll open up the document and I'll write it as hello Kali. I will save this up. Now, to change the directories from etc to NF2, we have already discussed how to use the cd command using just the folder name. Now, if we want to go to the entire directory, we can write cd home. As you can see, it is already prompting us to complete the name of the directory. At this point, we just have to press tab and it completes it for ourselves. Next, we already know we have to enter the desktop, NF and NF2. And this brings us to the current working directory. Here, if we press ls, we can find a file over here. Now, as discussed for the concatenate, it is used to show the contents of a file. So right now, if we press cat, which stands for concatenate, e-file. As you can see, we have written hello Kali in the text file and we can see the output right now. We can also use it to create new files. For example, if we write cat, any file name such as e-file2. Here we can write anything, hello Kali again. Once we press Ctrl C here, we can check e-file2 and we have hello Kali again printed over here. We can see the same using the concatenate command as well. If I press ls, you can see we have two files here and I can go with cat e-file2 and I have hello Kali again. This is how the concatenate command works. Apart from this, it can be used to copy. There is a different command like called cp, which is used to copy the files from one place to another. Mind you, this is not moving. This is only going to copy the command. For example, currently our pwd, which is the present working directory, is in the NF2 folder, as you can see over here. Let's copy the e-file2 to the NF folder. We can write cp e-file2 and give the path of the NF folder, which will be home, Simplilearn, desktop, and NF. Now if I press ls, I'll find both the files in NF2 since I copied. To go back to the NF folder again, we can again use the same command of we can again use the home, Simplilearn, desktop, and just NF. No NF2 this time, just NF. As you can see, this will change back our present working directory. Now when we press ls, we will find the efile2 file and the NF2 folder. And we can confirm this using the GUI as well. This is the NF folder, and you can see the NF2 folder and the efile2 document. If I write cat efile2, we can see the contents of the file. Now this can be done using moving as well. For example, if I go to cd nf2, which is the inside folder, it has both the document files like efile and efile2. Let's say I want to move the efile completely from nf2 to nf1. Instead of writing cp, the command I'm going to use is mv efile, and again give the path of the folder into which I have to copy, which will be again home, Simplilearn, desktop, and NF. As you can see, the contents of the NF2 have appeared here, and E file has been moved from NF2 to NF. This is the NF2, and we don't find E file here anymore. If we press cd ... and we go back to NF ls right now, and we can find both the files, E file that we moved and E file 2 that we copied from the NF2 folder. So this is how copying and moving will work using the terminal. Now this is just a simple one-line statement that might take a couple of clicks when using GUI. This is why the command line interface is considered to be much more streamlined for Linux operating systems. Another very important command for Linux operating system is the sudo command. Sudo is short for super user do. The command enables you to perform tasks that require administrative or root permissions. You can think of it as how we run programs as administrator on Windows systems. It is not advisable to use this command for daily use because it might be easy for an error to occur, and the permissions of root are very intricate, so new beginners are advised to use the sudo command only when absolutely necessary. For example, sudo su. With this command, I am giving this terminal a root permission. This su stands for this user. At this point, it's going to ask for my admin password. Once I enter my password, and I now have root access. Note how the password that I entered did not show up here. This is a security measure to prevent people from snooping on your root password, which is the end game of all this operating system. As you also can see, the symbol changed. If the dollar symbol is showing, it shows as a standard user. When you switch to root, you can easily see a hash symbol. This opens up a separate shell inside this terminal command. For example, we can exit out of the root user to the standard user using the command exit. And once again, we have the dollar sign and the root has vanished over here. There are some commands that will only work with administrative access. For example, when updating the Kali Linux system, we have to use apt update. As you can see, it says problem unlinking the file because permission denied. Now let's try this using sudo apt update. As you can see, it is updating the package repositories which work as the software installed on the system. This can be done using either writing the sudo command every time we want to perform a root access, or we can just write sudo su once and write apt update alone. The fetching is complete over here. For the second example, let's say I just write sudo su, and this time it's not going to ask me the password because at this current terminal process, I've already provided the root password once and it is in memory right now. Now, when we used to update the system, we had to write sudo apt update. That was because we were running it as a standard user. Now we are running it as a root user. So all we have to write is apt update, and it's going to continue its work. There you go. Another command that can be useful is the ping command. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be checking the internet connectivity. You can be used to check internet connectivity, or you can see if there is a local server on your system which needs to be pinged. Then you can check that. For example, if we have to write ping, and we can use either IP address or domain. Let's say if we want to check that if we can access google.com using this Kali Linux installation or not, we can write ping google.com, and you can see it shows the bytes being sent and received and how much time it took to take up the request. This can be done for local systems as well. For example, this installation of Kali Linux is being run on a virtual machine. Once this machine is running, I still have my host machine running over here, the IP address of which is 192.168.29.179. If I try to ping this from here, as you can see, the time to complete the request is drastically low compared to a website on the internet, considering this is on the local network. This is how the ping command is worked, and it can show you what kind of packages are transmitted, how many are received, if there was any kind of packet loss between the connection window, and other details. A very important command when working with the terminal for a long duration is the history command. Pretty self-explanatory. There are so many commands that are being run. Sometimes people forget what was the change they did or what was the directory name they put. A history command helps to recover some of the commands that you have written. It doesn't go all the way back, but it takes up many commands that were inputted in the last few processes. This is how the history command works. These are some of the most commonly used terminal commands. If you want to learn more about this terminal and every other feature of this, please let us know in the comment section, and we'll try to make an in-depth tutorial, especially if you could repeat. If you want to learn more about the terminal, please let us know in the comment section, and we will try to make an in-depth tutorial specifically for terminal commands on Linux. Moving on, we learn how to configure proxy chains on our system. Proxying refers to the technique of bouncing your internet traffic through multiple machines to hide the identity of the original machine. It is a good tool that hackers use to accomplish this goal is proxy chains. Essentially, you can use proxy chains to run any program through a proxy server. This will allow you to access internet from behind a restrictive firewall which hides your IP address. Proxy chains even allows you to use multiple proxies at once by chaining them together. One of the most important reasons that proxy chains is used in a security context is that it's easy to evade detection. Attackers often use proxies to hide their true identities while executing an attack. And when multiple proxies are chained together, it becomes harder and harder for a forensic professional to trace the traffic back to the original machine. When these proxies are located across countries, investigators would have to obtain warranties in the local jurisdictions where every proxy is located. To see how proxy chain works, let's open Firefox first and check our current IP address. Write Firefox, and there we go. As we can see, Firefox is now open. Let's check our current IP address right now. If we go to an address called myip.com, and you can see it easily detects our country is in India, and this is a public IP address. Now, if we move to the terminal again, here we can now write proxy chains -h. What this -h does is it finds a help. It stands for the help file. This is for help file. What we found out using this is proxy chains has a config file here, etc proxychains4.conf. This is the config file found. Using this config file, we can customize how our proxy chain should work. If we want to open that, we have to use it in a text editor. On Windows, we have Notepad and other things like that, Microsoft Word to edit documents. On Linux, we have a tool called Nano. To access the Nano, we use the command nano and give the path of the file that we want to check. As of right now, the proxy chains config file is located over here. So we're going to follow the path there. chains4.conf. And here we go. We see the config file. There are three basic types of proxy chaining here. We have a strict chain where all the proxy in the list will be used and they will be chained in order. We have a random chain where each connection made through proxy chains will be done by a random combo of proxies in the proxy list. And you have dynamic chain. It's the same as strict chain, but dead proxies are excluded from the chain. And here we can set up whichever type we want. To enable or disable a particular type, we use the hash symbol here. As you can see right now, all the lines have a hashtag symbol at the front, except this one, a dynamic chain. This is the current one being used. Let's say if I want to use a strict chain method, so I can add a hash value here and remove the hash here. At one point of time, any one of these 4 types should be enabled. Let's go for the dynamic chain. We can disable this strict chain by putting the hashtag in front and removing the dynamic chain. As you can see below, we have few commands to how to handle the nano text editor. This symbol is known as the control button on your keyboard. Now if we want to write out, which is synonymous to saving the file, supposed to go with Control O. So if I press Control O on my keyboard, it says file name to write, and we have to press enter here since we want to overwrite the proxy chains 4.conf file. We don't want to create a new file over here. So just press enter and we get a permission denied. This permission denied we're getting is because we have opened this using a standard user. etc is a system folder. To be able to make some changes, we have to use it using a sudo command. To exit this nano, we have to use the Control X command. We use Control X. We're going to clear, and this time we're going to use the sudo command. Sudo nano etc proxy chains 4.conf, and we have the same file open up again. Now this time if we want to make a change, let's say we're going to add a strict chain instead of a dynamic chain, we remove the hashtag from strict. We're going to use Control O for the save file option. We're going to press enter and it says wrote 160 lines. Again, if we want to reverse this change, we put the hashtag over here, enable dynamic chain, we press Control O, press enter, and it says wrote 160 lines. Now we can exit straight away using the Control X format. Right now we have not provided any file or a proxy chain. We can have proxy IP addresses from the internet, but we have to make sure that they are safe and they don't snoop on our data. When there is no proxy chains being provided personally, it's going to use the Tor network, but for that we have to start Tor. Tor is a service in Linux. To know more about this Tor, we can write sudo systemctl, which is used to know the status of services on the Linux operating system, and status of Tor. Systemctl, sorry, as instead of stl, it should be systemctl status Tor. As you can see, it is a Tor service, anonymizing overlay network for TCP connections, and it's currently inactive. Now to start this up, we have to write sudo systemctl start Tor. Now if we repeat the same sudo systemctl status Tor, as you can see, it's active now. You can see the green logo over here. Okay. To integrate the Firefox and the browser, we can use the proxy chains command directly over here. We can write proxy chains. We can use Firefox to launch our web browser, and let's say if we want to visit google.com. We press enter and the Firefox window is launched, and it should open up google.com next. And there we go. If we go to myip.com once again, as you can see, we have a different IP address and the country is unknown as well. So this is how we can use proxy chains to anonymize internet usage when using Kali Linux. Next on our agenda is the ability to scan networks using Nmap. At its core, Nmap is a network scanning tool that uses IP packets to identify all the devices connected to a network. You can learn more about Nmap using their help file. As you can see, these are some of the parameters that can be used when scanning ports of a system. You can see the version and the URL of the service over here. The primary uses of Nmap can be broken into three core processes. First, the program gives you detailed information on every IP active on your network, and then each IP can then be scanned. Secondly, it can also be used to providing a lot of live hosts and open ports, as well as identifying the OS of every connected device. Thirdly, Nmap has also become a valuable tool for users looking to protect personal and business websites. Using Nmap to scan your own web server, particularly if you're hosting your website from home, is essentially simulating the process that a hacker would use to attack your site. Attacking your own site in this way is a powerful way of identifying security vulnerabilities. As we already discussed, the host Windows 10 machine on this system has an IP address of 192.168.29.179. If you want to test the OS scan of this system, we're going to first get the root permission over here. We use the sudo command, and now we are a root user. We're going to launch the command nmap -o, which is supposed to be an OS detection scan. The IP address we can use of the host system 192.168.29.179. In a legitimate penetration testing scenario, we can use the IP address of the vulnerable device over here. We are going to let it scan for a while, and it's going to give us some guesses on what can the OS be. As you can see, the scan is done, and it has shown some of the ports that are open. You can see the MSRPC port open, the HTTPS 443 port open, which is used to connect to the internet, and it has some aggressive OS guesses as well. For example, it thinks there's a 94% chance that it's going to be a Microsoft Windows XP Service Pack 3. That's partly because a lot of the Windows XP update packages are still prevalent on Windows. Now that the OS detection is confirmed, there are multiple more details that we can gather from Nmap. Let's go with the nmap -a command, which is supposed to capture as much data as possible. There is also a speed setting. You can call it a speed setting or a control setting of the -t. -t ranges from T0 to T1 to T2 all the way up to T5. This basically determines how aggressively the victim is being scanned. If you scan slowly, it will take more time to provide the results, but it will also give a less chance for the intrusion detection system on the vulnerable machine firewall to detect that someone is trying to penetrate the network. For now, if we want to go with somewhat of a high speed, we can go with the T4 and provide the same IP address of the local machine I am trying to attack. It's going to take a little bit of time since it's trying to capture a lot of information. As you can see, the results are now here. It launched a scan and took a few top ports that are most likely vulnerable from a Windows XP perspective, and it showed a few ports over here. It has not shown 991 filtered ports, which could not be attacked anyway since they were closed for outside access. It shows a few fingerprint settings like the connection policies and the port details. It shows an HTTP options, some other intricate details that can be used when you attacking its servers. It shows a VMware version that it's running and some few other ports over here. Apart from that, we also have the aggressive OS guesses over here, just like we did with the -o, and you can see this time it is showing Windows 7 as 98%. No exact OS matches, since if there was any exact OS matches, we could have seen 100% chances over here. This is a trace route. A trace route will be the time and the path a connection request takes from the source to the destination. For example, this request went from 192.168.72.2 to a destination address. Since this is a local machine, it took only a single step. On multiple occasions, if you're trying to access a remote system, it's going to be a number of trace routes when it jumps from firewall to firewall and router to router. This is how we can use Nmap to find information about a system and find some vulnerable ports we can access. Moving on, we have a tutorial on how to use Wireshark to sniff network traffic. To start using Wireshark, we're going to have to open the application first. Now, during installation of Wireshark, there is an option to enable if non-root users can be able to capture traffic or not. In my installation, I have disabled that, so I will be launching Wireshark when using the root user itself. Also, to capture data, we need an external Wi-Fi adapter. You can see it over here in the VM tab, removable devices, RE-Link 802.1 and WLAN. This is an external Wi-Fi adapter which is inserted into my USB system. You can see it over here. If I write iwconfig, this is the one, WLAN 0. This is absolutely necessary because we need to have a monitor mode required. We won't need it for sniffing data on Wireshark right now, but it's going to be necessary later on in this tutorial as well, as we will see. For now, we can just start up Wireshark by writing its name on the command line, and it should start the program. Here we go. Here it's going to check which of the adapters we want to use. For example, right now the ETH0, which is supposed to stand for Ethernet 0 port, you can see data is being transmitted up and down. We're going to select ETH0. And we have started capturing data. You can see the data request from the source to destination, from the time and which protocol it is following, everything we can see. And we can see the IPv4 flags here as well, as you can see over here. To capture internet traffic, we can try running Firefox. If we just write wikipedia.com, and you can see the number of requests increasing. Okay, this is spelling mistake. Wikipedia. Here, you can see the application data of all these requests going up, and they're connected to a destination server of 102.166.224. Now, even if we check the transmission control protocol flags over here and so many more things, we cannot find anything beneficial. As you can see, the information over here is gibberish, which is supposed to be, since it's supposed to be encrypted. Now, this is possible due to this being an HTTPS website. Hence, you can see the log symbol over here, and connection is supposed to be secure. Now, what about HTTP ports? We have seen many people recommend to not visit HTTP ports. Repeat. We have seen many people recommend to not visit HTTP websites, and even if we have to visit, to not provide any critical information. For example, let's go to a random HTTP page over here. As you can see, this is saying connection is not secure. And this is an HTTP page and not HTTPS. Now, let's check for some of the information that is passing through this. This is a login form. Let's say I have a legitimate account over here. If I write my account name, and my password is supposed to be password 1234. I press login, and the password does not match because I do not have an account over here. But let's say I did, and I was logged in as expected. We can go to Wireshark. We can use filters over here. Now, all the requests that I'm sending, it's a TCP request. So I can write a filter containing TCP contains whatever string if it is being passed. Let's say for the end username, I write my account name. So I can just write my account name over here and press enter to find a request over here. Now, as you can see, there are many flags over here. If we go to the HTML form URL encoded and open up some of its flags, as you can see, I can see my account name and Simplilearn password over here. This is the same details that I input on the website. Let's say I did have a legitimate account on this website. I would have logged in with no problems, but anyone who would be using Wireshark to sniff on the data can easily get my credentials from here. This is why it's recommended to not provide any information on HTTP pages. The security is not up to the mark, and always look for the lock symbol when visiting any website or making any internet transactions or providing any information. This is how we can use Wireshark to detect transmission and sniff packet data that is being transferred through the network adapter. Next, we have to learn about what is Metasploit. The Metasploit project is a computer security project that provides information about security vulnerabilities and aids in penetration testing and IDS development. We can open up the terminal here. We're going to allow root access, and to open up Metasploit, the keyword is MSF console. It's going to take a little bit of time to start it up. Now the Metasploit console has been loaded. From here, we can decide what type of attack we want to launch and what kind of exploits we can launch against vulnerable targets. For example, like we had already discussed, I'm running this virtual machine on a Windows 10 host machine. So if I open the command prompt from my Windows 10 over here, if I need to check the IP address once, I go with ipconfig. Here you can see the IP address of this local machine. Moving on, if we have to attack that machine, let's say we want to see what kind of exploits are going to work over there. Now we already know that Windows has some common vulnerabilities. One of those vulnerabilities is the HTA server vulnerability. HTA is supposed to be a HTML application, but when passed the right payload, it can be used to open a backdoor into a system. To start off with the Metasploit and accessing such applications, we're going to use the command use exploit, and the name of the reverse HTA server is this: Windows MISC for miscellaneous HTA server. As you can see, it already found this one. Alright, now there are some options that we need to set for this exploit to go through. For example, you can see some of the options over here. There is a payload. The payload is supposed to be the malicious file that we are going to send on the HTML application, which allows us to give the backdoor. For example, right now the payload, which is the malicious file, is a Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP. Completely understandable. Now let's set the L host. L host and R host and SRV host should be the one where we are going to launch the attack from. For example, if we launched another tab of this console and we just press ifconfig, the IP address is 192.168.72.130. So we're going to set the L host as 192.168.72.130, and we're going to do the same thing with SRV host. We're going to set a port where we need to capture the backdoor access. Next, the payload has already been set. This payload will launch a backdoor and give us Meterpreter access to the system. Meterpreter can be considered as an upgrade of a normal command prompt shell. We will look into it once we get the access in the first place. Now that we have set the commands, we can press on exploit and press enter. You can see we have a URL over here. We're going to copy this URL. Once the URL is copied, we take it into the browser and paste it. This will ask us to download this file. Now, as per browser security settings, this file should be blocked by default. We can decide to keep it, and with the correct formulation of this malicious package, even the website browser antivirus softwares will not be able to detect good payloads. We're going to save this file and we're going to open it. Publisher could not be verified. If we press run and we go back to our MetaPeter access over here, you can see it has already captured a URL of an HTTP server and it is writing delivering payload. Just have to wait for a few seconds till the payload is delivered. It has sent this much amount of data. MetaPeter session 1 is opened and we should get the access soon. There we go. Now, to understand where is the session set, we can write sessions -i. As you can see, it has a MetaPeter over here. We're going to write sessions -i. The session ID is 1, so we're going to write 1. And we have the MetaPeter access. Now, to get a fair idea of the system, we're going to write sysinfo, and it's going to the computer name, the OS, architecture, all these things. We can write the help command to see what are the things that we can get out of the system. We can take screenshots, we can control the webcam and start a video chat. We can take a lot of things over here. There are other commands as well where we can change the file directory, like the cat command, cd command. There are so many things that work in the normal CMD which we can run on the MetaPeter as well. Now, if we want to access this command prompt of the system directly, we can go with this. We have to write shell, and there we go. We are in the downloads folder right now. To see if this is the same computer or not, we're going to write ipconfig. As you can see, it is our victim machine with 192.168.29.171. We can just press exit and we're back with the MetaPeter access. This is how we can use MetaPeter and Metasploit to gain access to a Windows 10 machine. Next, let's take a look at how we can get root access from a Windows 10 system. We just learned how we can get a MetaPeter access from a system. We can background this MetaPeter session by writing background and pressing enter. We can still see the sessions -i. It's still present over here. Now, these kind of access are not administrative access. These are the kind of backdoors that can be created for standard users. But to get a complete access of a system, including the program files, the Windows documents, we need to have root access or administrative access. To do that, we're going to use another exploit. Reminder that the MetaPeter session of the standard access is already present and we're not messing with it right now. We're going to set up another session, albeit with the same machine. That exploit name is use exploit Windows local bypass UAC event viewer. And there we go. Now, if we check the options that we can put in the system, we have to choose an exploit target. We need to put a session as well. Let's say we're going to use the session 1. This is the session that has the MetaPeter access with the standard user. It doesn't have the system user. We're going to write set session 1 and we're going to run exploit. Run a few commands and it opened a second MetaPeter session. As you can see, it is the session 2. If I write sysinfo, you can still see I'm not the system user right now. I'm still just a normal user. How can we check that? If you go to shell, I can still see user Genebi downloads, all these things. If I press exit, go back to the MetaPeter. There is a command on MetaPeter, get system. It attempts to elevate your privilege to that of the local system, which basically means you get promoted into root access. So if we write get system And due to pipe impersonation, we now have the system root access. As you can see, now it has become x64 and we are the admin users. Now if I go to shell, I can easily go back, Windows, and I can easily access these things. This kind of control over the Windows folders and the program files folders, these kind of things are not possible if you are not an admin access or the command prompt has not been run with admin permissions. This is how we can use privilege escalation to get into an admin access system. We use the second exploit, which was the bypass UAC event viewer exploit, and essentially used it with the first session. As you can read here, Windows escalation UAC protection bypass. It was first disclosed on 2016, but it still works on some systems. This is how we can get root access on a Windows 10 installation. Hope you learned something new today. If you have any doubts regarding the topic mentioned in the lesson, please feel free to let us know in the comment section below.